What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another video on the channel. And today we are going to be going over my top 10 picks for the best entry-level horror films. So this is a video idea that I've been thinking about making for a while now. I don't know how well it's going to resonate with people. I've mainly done movie reviews, and to be honest, I haven't been on YouTube long enough to tell who my audience is, how far into horror they are, because I've covered mainly classic slasher films up until this point. That will change in the future, but maybe you are somebody who has watched a few horror films or wants to get into it but don't really know where to start. This is the list for you. We are going to go over 10 films that I think are really good starting points for horror fans. If you already are a horror fan, watch this video, tell me what you think of my picks, what are your picks for the best entry-level horror films. But yeah, let's kick this off with number 10. So number 10 is going to be the original Scream from 1996. Yes, of course it's going to be on this list. I mean, this is the film that really introduced a new generation of people to horror. And I know there are a couple people that would say to really fully appreciate this film, you would have to be an avid slasher fan to really get all the in-jokes and tropes and some of the meta storyline that they're going for. And I can agree with that to an extent, but at the same time, I feel like so much of that stuff is just common knowledge at this point. Like, you could have never watched a horror film or a slasher film in your life, and I feel like it would be common knowledge to know that people make dumb decisions, people go off by themselves, when they probably shouldn't. Everyone's a suspect.
A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
But yeah, getting into the actual film, I mean, this is just a classic, man. I just posted a review of it a few days ago for my full thoughts, but summarized, I think this is such a smartly written slasher. It has a very, very iconic killer in Ghostface who changes throughout the franchise. It has a very iconic killer in Ghostface with a really cool and simplistic look. It has great characters, a great cast on top of that. These characters are interesting, fleshed out, and have some really cool story to them. There's some third act reveals that land every time I watch this. It's so damn good, man. It also gives you one of the best final girls of all time in Sidney Prescott. Like I said, I talked for 15 minutes about this film. I uploaded that video 2 days ago. If you want my full thoughts, go check that out. But yeah, Scream is sitting at number 10, and this list is in no particular order, by the way, because I think all of these films are fantastic and a lot of them are classics. So you're going to have a lot of different variety on this list. But yeah, number 10, Scream, classic. Let's move on to number 9. Coming in at number 9, we got Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Again, I said this list was going to be filled with some classics, and yeah, this film came out in the 50s. It's black and white, very well known. Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, directed this film. And again, a lot of this is probably common knowledge by now, but there's just so many revolutionary and interesting things that this film does that really haven't been done before in this genre. I mean, you had a lot of suspense thrillers, and that's to a degree what this film is, but it really does go hard into some of the horror elements. I mean, you have the character of Marion Crane, and you get into her story for about half the film, and then you have the full bait and switch. Just in case you've never seen it, I won't go in detail with what happens, but this film, it gives you so many iconic things. I mean, Norman Bates as a character is just one of the best icons of the genre of all time, in my opinion. Psycho did turn into a franchise, and Psycho 2 I actually like even better than the first one, which is, I never thought I would be saying that because this film is so classic. But this first one, it gives you, again, so many cool things. Norman Bates as a character, the whole mother storyline, if you know, you know, and the shower scene, one of the most iconic images and scenes in film history. I mean, that score as well is fucking incredible. I love this movie, and I don't revisit it enough. I've seen it maybe 5 or 6 times in my life, but I should go back and rewatch this. It is a great entry point for starting horror fans. Now, these next two films are going to be Stephen King movies, both of them, or adaptations. So I'm not going to rank them together, but I will give that as a preface. So number 8 is going to be The Shining. You knew it was going to be on this list as well, directed by Stanley Kubrick. This film is extremely iconic, and while it is a horror film, it has so many other genres and things going for it. I mean, this is pretty much a psychological horror thriller, as well as kind of a family drama to a certain degree, and almost a character study of Jack Torrance, the father of this family. Essentially, the story of this film, this family goes up to a hotel as winter innkeepers, essentially. The hotel is haunted. Jack Torrance, the father, starts to see ghosts. Danny, the son, has always had these weird kind of visions and paranormal activities surrounding him throughout his childhood. And the film, it's really a slow burn, but the reveals and the crazy shit that does happen in this movie is so awesome and iconic. I mean, you get so many cool scenes like the blood elevator and the whole typewriter scene, you know, the all work, no play makes Jack a dull boy, and then the ghosts, the conversations, the Shining itself as this supernatural power where you can communicate with people through it. I mean, it's so cool, and a little bit strange that Stephen King kind of denounces this movie in a way, because I mean, this was based off of the novel The Shining by Stephen King, but if I'm being honest, I've read the novel and I really prefer Stanley Kubrick's film. I'm sorry. I don't know how controversial that's going to be, but this film is held as a classic. The Shining by Stephen King is honestly not one of my favorite books that he's written, but Dr. Sleep is a different story. Dr. Sleep is fucking awesome, but that is for a different video. So, number 8, The Shining. And our second Stephen King adaptation on this list, number 7, is going to be Misery. Now, I love this adaptation. I don't know if I like it more than The Shining, but it is damn good. Like, you have James Caan in here as a writer who gets into a car accident, and you get Kathy Bates as this kind of like sweet, quirky, weird, old Southern lady who kind of picks him up from the accident and helps him to recover in her house. And then you find out she's a crazed fan of his novels, his Misery novels that he writes, and she ends up locking him in her house and keeping him as a prisoner, basically to rewrite his last novel that he wrote, to change the ending because she did not like it. And the best thing by far about this movie is the performance by Kathy Bates. I mean, I think this was her pretty much entry into Hollywood, and she came out right out the gate and won an Oscar for this role, and it is well deserved, because the way she switches from very normal to literally psychotic within the span of a second, like just like that, it's actually insane. And the more you find out about this lady, the more psychotic you discover that she is, the more terrifying she becomes, because she presents herself as such a normal person and such a nice person to, you know, help this guy recover from this monstrous car crash that he gets in. It's just a weirdly terrifying film. Like, me describing that concept probably doesn't sound that scary, but the way that they execute it in this film, it's fucking scary, man. I love this movie. Number 7, Misery. Coming in at number 6, we got Ridley Scott's Alien. This, again, another classic film. This is getting into sci-fi horror, and actually a really, really cool story about this film. My dad, growing up, he was born in the very late 60s and got to see this movie when he was about 7 years old. So his whole thing in life, in my early childhood, was telling me, once you hit 7, we're watching Alien, and there's nothing you can do about it. And at that point, I had seen a couple horror films. I think I'd seen Jaws at that point as well, but nothing fucking prepared me for this movie, man. This was the first really R-rated film I was exposed to. Like I said, I had just turned 7, and he was like, it's time. And as scared as I probably was at the time, because this film is fairly extreme. I mean, there is a lot worse out there, obviously, and I have seen it, but especially for a 7-year-old, hey, if your kid has balls, show them this movie, alright? But again, like I say with all these films, there's so much cool and iconic stuff. Just the H.R. Geiger's design for the Xenomorph, where it's very unique and sci-fi, but also very weirdly sexual. I mean, you have the concept of the face hugger that attaches itself to you and ends up laying an egg down your throat, and then you have the chest burster that quite literally bursts your chest open when it's ready to hatch, and the life cycle of this perfect being that is the Xenomorph. I mean, it's such an iconic villain image, you know? It's such a great sci-fi character, and you got Sigourney Weaver in here, who's an awesome character, and all the people on the Nostromo with her. It's just such a cool experience, especially when you see this for the first time. I mean, it holds up perfectly today. Like, there's nothing I would change about this film. Absolutely perfect. Aliens is fucking awesome too. This franchise is actually pretty decent as a whole. But speaking on this first film, one of my favorites of all time, one of the most extreme things I had seen up until that point. So definitely recommend this one as a film to start with if you're getting into horror, sci-fi horror in particular. Coming in at number 5, you have Gremlins. This is probably the least extreme entry on this list. I saw this film as a very young kid for the first time and really enjoyed it. You can watch it either at Halloween or Christmas time because it has both of those themes in there, but this is just another classic 80s film that you hear referenced everywhere. I mean, the whole rules surrounding Gizmo, the gremlins themselves. I mean, you can't get them wet, don't feed them after midnight, they don't like sun, all of that stuff. It's spoofed, it's parodied in so much stuff, even coming out now, so you can really tell how much of an impact that this film had. And it's really just a great time capsule of the 80s as a decade as well. I mean, it's a feel-good movie in a lot of ways as well. I mean, Gizmo is one of the cutest creature designs of all time as far as I'm concerned, and it's just a very fun movie that is not as extreme, but definitely has the horror elements to it. Coming in at number 4, we have Fright Night, another classic 80s film, but this time we are talking about vampires. And side note, I fucking love vampire movies. It's one of my favorite like horror. It's not really a subgenre, but that's one of my favorite focuses of films. I love vampire movies, and I am shocked that I had not seen Fright Night before I was like 15. I watched this about 3 years ago for the first time and could not believe that I had not seen this sooner. It's so damn good. You will hear me say that a lot. You already have, but I love this movie. It has a lot of callbacks to the 50s Hammer horror of like Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee times. That's really cool to see. You have the central vampire in here of Jerry Dandridge, who is just such a cool 80s vampire. I mean, you have Chris Sarandon, who's in Child's Play and The Princess Bride. He plays the central vampire, and he's just such a cool character that you kind of just want to hang out with him. Like, if that guy asked you to become a vampire, you would have a hard time saying no, kind of like Evil Ed does. But so much cool stuff. Like I said, the throwbacks to the Hammer horror. You got Peter Vincent, who is kind of a vampire hunter, so he's kind of playing the Peter Cushing in this film, brought into the 80s, which is just really cool to see. And when you get into the third act, where you have all these different vampire transformations into all these different creatures, I mean, you get some like werewolf stuff in there, as well as some bat monsters, and the signature look of these vampires when their mouths are open like wide. It all looks so damn good, and the fact that it's practical, I love it. I love going back and rewatching this film. Definitely check this one out if you like vampire movies. At number 3, we got the first Friday the 13th entry on this list, which is going to be Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. Now, I did not include the original Friday the 13th on this list, honestly, because I am not a huge fan of it. I know that is going to piss some people off, but Part 4, in my opinion, is the best in the franchise. It is my favorite of the franchise. I really enjoy the first one for its classic appeal. I like Pamela Voorhees' reveal at the end as the killer, but when I went and saw the first Friday the 13th, I was expecting to see Jason in the hockey mask fucking people up, and I had to go through the whole franchise to really figure out, oh, okay, this is what the first two do, and then in the third one, he gets his signature hockey mask. So if you have never seen a Friday the 13th movie, watch the first one, but if you start with the final chapter, you're not missing anything. You can pick up on it really quickly. It's not like this franchise has a ton of plot, so you can get into it fairly easily, and it is definitely not the final chapter. But the things that I absolutely love about this movie is, for a Friday the 13th movie, I love the cast of characters this time around. I mean, you have Corey Feldman as this little kid who makes masks. He's a very cool character, Tommy Jarvis. And you also have Crispin Glover in here doing his crazy ass dance, so that's always a positive. But the portrayal of Jason this time around, I think, is in the competition or argument for the scariest and almost darkest portrayal of Jason. I think Derek Mears might take that slightly, but it's a really good version of Jason, and it also feels like a real director came in and made this film. I mean, there are a couple entries in this franchise where they got like softcore porn directors. Looking at Friday the 13th 5, The New Beginning, I'm looking at you. But this one feels like an actual effort to make a really, really good movie, you know? The kills in this also are awesome. Tom Savini comes back and gives us his incredibly awesome style of kills. So you got all those great practical effects that you got in the first film. Just an all-around great slasher with everything you would want wrapped up in the package that is Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. And number 2, of course, this film is going to be on this list. That is going to be the original 1978 Halloween by John Carpenter. I have not talked about this film on my channel yet. This is officially the first time I'm talking about it, and honestly, what else can I say about this? It is one of the most classic slasher films of all time. I know it is not the first slasher film, but to me, this is really what all of the 80s slashers really aspired to be. I mean, Friday the 13th, if you do some research on it, you'll know it was created solely as a ripoff to Halloween, just a little bit sleazier with the more gore and tits approach. But this original film is so awesome. I'm getting tired of saying that, but it's true. John Carpenter is a master of horror, but even more a master of simplicity in this movie. I mean, it is not very plot heavy, but just the intrigue around what is there is more than enough to carry this film's story. I mean, you have Michael Myers, who kills his sister as a very young kid. He is eventually sent to Smith's Grove sanitarium, eventually breaks out on Halloween night, and then stalks these babysitters around. Of course, the main one being Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who is fucking amazing in this movie. One of the things I love the most about this film is just the Halloween atmosphere. I mean, throw this on in like mid to late October when you're really getting close to October 31st, and it is a magical experience. I have to watch this at least once a year, or I just don't feel right afterwards, you know? And the man himself, Michael Myers, I mean, you don't really get a full sense of what this guy is in this first film, which just adds to the intrigue and mystery of his character. Like, is he fully human, or is he supernatural, or is he kind of a mix of both? Because you get some very human moments, like seeing him as a kid murdering his sister, which leads everybody to believe he is the kind of embodiment of evil. And you see him get shot a lot, especially at the end of this film, and he just is gone when you look down. He's not there anymore. So who can survive being shot 6 times, right?
I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart.
Can't have gotten very far. Come on.
I shot him 6 times.
And Donald Pleasance is so awesome in this movie. He is kind of there to give this thing a very big, grandiose feel, if you will. Like, he delivers all these very Shakespearean quotes and lines talking about the evil and, you know, the devil's eyes. All of that stuff is so good. And of course, I can't not talk about the score, which just totally builds up the atmosphere and makes everything better. I love the score for this film. As soon as October hits, I will be playing that bitch on Spotify all day long. I don't care. Number 2, John Carpenter's Halloween. Fucking awesome. Now, a lot of you guys are probably not expecting this to be my number 1, and to be honest, I don't hear a ton of people talking about this movie, but my number 1 is Poltergeist from Tobe Hooper and Steven Spielberg. I mean, this movie gets so overlooked sometimes. This is the first horror film that I ever saw in my life. I think I was about 4 years old. We had just moved out of my first house that I grew up in to another house literally just down the street, but the landlord, because we were renting, was a architect for Disney, and he had converted our garage into a home movie theater, which was incredible. And this is the first movie I watched in there. Like I said, I was maybe 4 or 5. Again, my dad had watched this every year since he was a kid and introduced all that stuff to me. I have so many great memories of my dad introducing me to great films, especially horror films like we've talked about on this list. So this one does have some sentimental attachment and value to me, which is why I would probably put it a lot higher than some people. But this is just a great haunted house movie in that kind of Amblin entertainment style that you'd come to expect from Steven Spielberg. Although while I look at this as kind of a collaboration between Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper, Steven has maintained that this is really Tobe Hooper's film, and you might know him from directing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So there's that. But yeah, when you get down to it, this is just the story of a normal everyday family that comes to find out their house has a poltergeist in it. Weird occurrences start happening, and this movie scared the shit out of me when I was 4 years old. My God, man. You get some pretty gnarly practical effects in here too, like the scene where the guy is standing at the sink and starts ripping his face off. Love that. You get the maggot filled steak, which is just nasty as fuck. Or actually, it was the chicken. The steak starts moving by itself. Weird shit. All the ghost stuff in this film holds up super well. I mean, you have one of my favorite designs for like a ghost monster of all time that comes out of Carol Ann's closet, And just all the performances in this film, you really feel like this is almost kind of a documentary in a way. Like they just went to a family's house and started filming these occurrences. Like everybody has so much awesome chemistry with each other in this film. And all of that leads up to the reveal that their whole town was built on top of this burial ground that was then moved to make things cheaper, but they left the bodies under the houses, which is just a wild and fucked up concept that gets to me every time. And you have the paranormal expert named Tangina that comes in here, who starts giving these monologues about what is happening to Carol Ann because she gets sucked into a different dimension and taken. It is wild. Those monologues that Tangina gives gave me legitimate chills when I was a kid because I was so scared. And the acting is so damn good, and the whole story is so good. Man, this movie is awesome. Just talking about it, I literally want to stop this video and go watch it. So I know this list is in no particular order, but if I did have to put one film at number 1 as the best entry level film for new horror fans, Poltergeist would be that number 1. Please go check this movie out if you have never seen it. It is totally overlooked by a lot of people, and I do not hear it get talked about nearly as much as it should in today's current landscape. So definitely go check Poltergeist out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what your picks for the best entry-level horror films are in the comments. Let me know if you agree or disagree with some of my picks. Let's talk about this. If you are a new horror fan, subscribe to this channel for more videos in this style coming out soon. Tomorrow we are going to be talking about Scream 6, and the day after I will have a ranking of all the Scream films out for you guys. So if you're a Scream fan, if you're excited for that, please stay tuned. We're going to do some really cool shit in the future. Also, my disturbing movie series will be coming out very soon. We are talking about Cannibal Holocaust, so that one's going to be fun. But for real, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you are looking forward to any of that stuff, please subscribe, stay tuned, like, comment, do all that cool stuff. And yes, I will see you guys very soon in the future. Have a good day.